Welcome to the NCDWI Guide podcast, where defenders of the Constitution assemble to prepare for courtroom battle and firm owners gather to develop marketing strategies that will revolutionize the practice of criminal defense. Here's your host, the NCDWI guy, Jake Minick.
Hello, fellow freedom fighters, and welcome to episode 217 of the NCDWI Guy podcast. On today's episode, I am joined by my close friend and law partner, Gint Krulikas. Gint and I have known each other for over 20 years. We knew each other when he was in middle school. I think I was either in middle school or high school. We were in the same church community growing up. We have been in the same youth group together. And then ultimately life sent us the blessing, at least sent me the great blessing of having Gint as a partner. Gint is an absolute machine, thus kind of the reason for the title of this episode. I saw a quote the other day on my daily calendar from Coach Lou Holtz that said, "Without self-discipline, success is impossible, period." Without self-discipline, success is impossible, period. And the reason I would say that Gint is really the attorney that I send other lawyers to at the office when they say, how can I better manage my time? How can I figure out a way of kind of getting more things done? How should I go about kind of like building, my practice in kind of my local market? The reason that I think Gint is the go-to person on these type of questions is because he is just a beast of self-discipline. He is a literal machine. Gint shares a ton of wisdom in today's episode. He talks about kind of the path that he had through law school and through kind of getting the Wilmington office off the ground, which has become, just one of our dominant offices at the firm, and kind of what it takes to build something over time. How do you kind of put in the daily work that then showcases itself months, years, and decades down the road into the city of Rome? What does the beginning stages of that look like? He also shares some of his interesting hacks for how he knocks out so much in a day in terms of the organization of his calendar, which I think is both unique and amazing. And so I'm very excited to share this conversation with you all. I love talking to Gint, and I know y'all are going to get a ton of value out of this episode. Well, stranger, this is going to be an awkward conversation because we just don't get to talk very, very often. So Gint Krulikas is in the house on the podcast. My partner down killing it in the Wilmington office, and excited to have a conversation about how you have gotten the Wilmington office to where it is and some of the kind of bigger picture dealings at the office, the growth that you've got to see since pretty early on. It's been a long time, Git. So excited to walk through some of those lessons learned.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I'm excited.
Well, I think we got to start like way back at the beginning. I was trying to remember the first time that we met that I can remember was at Sam's Club at a car wash. We were doing a car wash for World Youth Day, which was 2002. So I'm assuming that this was either earlier that summer or it was 2001. I don't know if it was like a year before or if it was like the year of World Youth Day. Do you remember what year you guys moved to Weaverville?
I want to say it was either 2002 or 2003.
Okay,
but
so
I
probably was
don't
2000.
remember.
It had to have been 2002 then, because it was definitely we were doing a car wash for that World Youth Day. And And yeah, y'all's van rolled up, and like, kind of crazy to think that's been 22 years back at this point. So that's a long time, man.
Oh yeah. We at the time had just moved from Florida and we were vacationing up in Burnsville. And so we would come into Asheville to kind of see civilization out of the great wilds of Burnsville. And we were coming through after church, went through the gas station. We're like, oh, we could use a car wash. And the next thing you know, my parents start talking to the people there, and we realize, hey, these are people we want to hang out with and get to know, and this is the community that we're trying to get involved in.
Yeah,
It's pretty
crazy. So
wild.
we were both I'm trying to think how old I would have been at that time, maybe 16, somewhere in that range. So yeah, man, it's been a long time that we have known each other, and it's been cool to like have the, you know, friendship that developed obviously out of that kind of like shared group of friends, and then kind of like blossom into a professional relationship, which has you've run the gambit, like intern writing blogs, which we got to get into because it's just like that was such a rite of passage that it was just it's too good to skip that. But then, through associate and then just crushing it as managing partner, I mean, just killing it. So we kind of walk through. I mean, we don't have to bore the audience with every single interaction that we had in high school days, but in terms of like relevance to the law side of things, and certainly share any ridiculous stories that you remember on my end of things from those early days. But yeah, kind of your first experience at the office and law school, kind of walk through what led down the path towards interest in the law.
Oh yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, during law school, after that first year, was trying to find some kind of internship or something meaningful that I could do during that summer to bolster my resume and or at least get somewhat legal experience. I mean, you don't really get a whole lot of legal experience as a 1L or the summer after 1L year. But luckily reached out to you. You were willing to take a gamble on me and let me enter the sweatshop, which
It was
basically
definitely a
was
sweatshop.
that little tiny office on Merriman Avenue that every time it rained,
Flooded.
flooded. But basically was able to participate in the letter writing or the letter stuffing campaign every morning to send out to potential clients, and then pretend to sound somewhat smart and write legal blogs for you.
If you
That
ever get tongue cancer, it's because you were an intern at Minick Law. That's the
it wasn't until the second summer that I realized you could get one of those little glue sticks that would save your tongue.
we
But
don't tell people that till year two.
I was gonna say there's some healthy hazing there. But yeah, basically was able to do that, write some legal blogs, and then shadow you in court as much as possible because let's be honest, that was a more interesting way to pass the day than to
100%. Yeah.
sit back there in front of a computer just typing out blogs as fast as possible. But basically was able to do that throughout law school. Very grateful for that opportunity. And then 3L years spoke to you about coming back as a attorney. And again, I think at first you were a little bit hesitant because I think at that point the business wasn't very booming and or expanding. But again, you kind of took that leap with me. And then the summer of studying for the bar, I'm sitting there, stressed out, frantic, trying to cram as much knowledge in my brain as possible when I get I don't remember if it was an email or a phone call like, "Hey, Gint, you got a couple minutes?" And I'm like, "Yeah." That job in Asheville that I had for you, I don't think I really have that for you anymore. I'm just like, oh gosh. But I've always wanted to open an office down on the beach down in Wilmington. What are your thoughts? And I was like, at this point, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm studying for the bar. I'm just trying to get through this, but sure, that sounds phenomenal. spoiler alert, I had never been to Wilmington in my life before, never vacationed down there. Didn't even really know where it was, but was willing to take that leap. And luckily, my fiance and now wife, Margaret, was willing to take that leap with me. And that's how we wound up down in Wilmington. And it was kind of scary,
I bet. Yeah.
walking in,
Yeah.
not really knowing what to do as a lawyer, new town, new marriage, everything new. And for a while there, it was kind of touch and go. I didn't know how it would go, but was able to kind of scratch it out. And now it's a pretty successful office. So, yeah, kind of long-winded answer, but
Yeah, no, 100%. I think it's there is the kind of title of this podcast is Man or Machine, and it's definitely you have this just kind of like unbelievable like method of kind of knocking things out. Like, as you're very, very organized, and you never seem stressed out by anything, but like you're very organized about getting work knocked out. So just like a couple takeaways, and this is kind of like the first insight into that like machine mentality that I just, some of it maybe can be learned, but there's just like something about the way that you do business that is just extremely methodical with the blog post. So basically we had the NC Crimes book, and this was in the early stages of like kind of internet blogging. Like there was not very many legal blogs that existed, and you must have knocked out like several hundred blogs about every crime in the NC Crimes book, like just going through and kind of like rewriting that content in a way that like we had a blog post for almost every crime that was in the crimes manual. And so it just is that was kind of like the first insight into just like the, again, method of like, this is kind of like the uh you get on a task and just kind of like are methodical about knocking that out. But I also think, we got pretty, I was very fortunate, I feel like, in terms of our relationship on the professional level, to have known you beforehand, and then have the ability to kind of like reach out and have you be so flexible in terms of literally moving from one side of the state that is a big state, long state, to the very opposite end of the state. And I don't think that necessarily happens without having some level of trust. I mean, on specifically on your end, and it's worked out really well in terms of kind of where the office is now. But that was just a giant leap of faith. We had, I think we had possibly, I think we may have already started building some like landing pages for the Wilmington office at that point. Um, uh, but it was, very, very kind of like testing the waters kind of, thought process. And then it's basically like, all right, Gint, go in and make this happen. So I definitely like kind of want to, go a little bit into a deep dive of what the early, days, months, and years of the Wilmington office looked like, because I think so many people that listen to the podcast are kind of attorneys in the early stages of uh, their career, or are thinking about like opening up a satellite office. And this was something that you literally built from scratch. So, kind of what did that look like, boots on the ground side of things?
Yeah. Well, basically, you were gracious enough to let me start work in the Asheville office through, because I passed the bar September, but I was getting married at the end of October. And so I stayed there until the wedding, because the wedding was in Asheville. And then we moved to Wilmington that basically the very same weekend, the first weekend of November. And then from there, I mean, the first part of it was just logistically, going to the office, setting it up, buying a desk, getting a computer set up, printer, phone, the kind of nitty gritty stuff that, no one enjoys doing. So that was kind of the first part. but you kind of run out of those tasks pretty quickly. And then it was trying to figure out, well, now what? I'm a freshly minted attorney, got that fresh law license, newly framed. It looks great on the wall, but that means nothing because you know absolutely nothing. So from there, it was A, getting my name on the court appointed list to at least try to get some initial clients. And then B, starting to build up our marketing presence in the local market since we had nothing previously. And then also trying to get my name out there and or get my face in the courtroom in front of DAs, in front of clerks, in front of judges, so that people could kind of see who I am. I'll be honest, at first it was slow going. There were a lot of days where I would show up to the office. I'm very much kind of a creature of habit. I need to be in the office. I'm not very good at working from home because I'll wind up distracting myself or just not doing anything. So even in those early days, show up at 8 a.m. initially, to knock out those letters we were sending, but then you just kind of sit there and you're like, well, now what? So there was a lot of looking at the phone, hoping that it would ring, working on blogs and marketing and websites to try to get our name out there, Wilmington specific.
Yeah,
And then
just to interrupt real quick, like I think that, even in just good lessons learned here, like the sending out the letters, wasn't just like a thing during the intern days. It's like, even in the, attorney role, it was like, this is how we're going to try to land clients. And I think part of the reason that we were having you send those out from Wilmington is it's like they'll get there faster if
that's
they
right.
come from like the local office. But again, it's like that, I think having that mentality as a, young lawyer or you're 10 years in, like nothing is beneath me. If it makes sense for me to be doing this thing, then like there's nothing beneath me. Now, if there's like somebody else that it makes more sense to have do this thing and I can delegate and elevate, great. But like there's nothing, I feel like that you have a very humble mindset of like if it's gonna make financial sense, if this is gonna make business sense, then I'm all in. And that's a huge thing in the early stages of practice or 10 years down the road.
Oh yeah, because especially back then, I think that first year you probably lost money on me. So I was like, I need to be able to justify what I'm doing, what I'm getting paid, even if that's me sitting there stuffing envelopes, licking them, walking down to the post office, whatever. Because if one of those letters turns into a paying client, that at least shows that, I'm doing something. So at that point, I was doing all that, was trying to get into the courtroom to observe, if anything, watch other people interact with the DAs, interact with the judges, watch trials, try to get my feet wet a little bit, and then try to basically get some phones ringing and hopefully some paying clients. In those early days, someone was calling me. I was doing everything in my power to try to get them to hire me. Didn't really know what I was doing. Didn't know how to quote someone. Probably was underquoting myself a lot. But at the end of the day, I was like, I just want a client.
Yes. Oh yeah.
You got a felony. You got $500. Let's do this. Or that DWI. Let's get you in. You can make payment plans $10 a week. That's fine. I just want something to do to go to court and get some experience. But that's kind of where I started. And a lot of kind of where I'm at now, I think, stems from that, trying to develop systems of following up with people. That one phone call that I had with a speeding ticket that was on the line that said, hey, well, it might take a couple days for me to figure this out. Now I was following up with them the next day or shooting them an email like, hey, if you have any questions, let me know. Most of that was selfish on my part. I just wanted to have a paying client, but it kind of developed some of the procedures that I have now of following up with clients. I'm significantly more busy at this point, but I still, with every single phone call that comes through, I try to give them a follow-up phone call next day, give them a follow-up email. And that all kind of started from when I first started. So I think it's a lot of ingrained memory or I don't know what the word is, just kind of skills that I've developed on that end of things. But essentially, with that early part of building the office, walking into court with my one case, I wanted to make sure I was doing as good of a job that I could do for that one client, because that one client, if I do a good job, might turn into another client or might lead into word of mouth advertising. Now, again, I was struggling at first because A, you don't have a whole lot of clients, and then B, the clients that you do have, half the time I've never handled that type of case before. So I'm still trying to figure out, what do I need to do? Who do I need to talk to? How do I need to approach this? Which DA do I need to speak with? Which judge might be open to this type of resolution? So it was a lot of trial by fire. Those first couple of years, every time I walked in the courtroom, just nerves shooting up, getting stressed. Like, how is this going to turn out? Am I going to fall on my face? Am I going to say something stupid? Whatever. But I think that's a very common thing for many new attorneys, even ones that, might have a mentor in the courtroom with them, a boss or someone that they're, shadowing around. I mean, once you start handling your own cases, it's a whole new world essentially.
Yeah,
But
no, yeah, definitely is. I think that it's so interesting in terms of that like mindset of kind of like the development from the early stages. I think it's super, again, it just shows like a really interesting, work ethic and kind of mindset of like, I'm going to get into the office at a certain time, even if there's nobody else coming into the office, today. Like, this is my workspace, my work time, and I am going to fill it with something. Like, there's, whether it's studying, whether it's going and like reaching out to maybe a local connection, there was a lot of building that had to occur, but for me, I guess maybe like a similar experience I had was like with studying for the bar. I just treated it like a job. I'm going to go in and start studying at 8 and I'm going to stop at 5. Like every day, that's what I'm going to do. I'm not going to go long into the night. Like, I don't study good, after a certain time, the brain clocks out. Like, I'm going to still have weekends with my family. Like, I'm treating this as my full-time job. And I feel like that was from the word go, like how you treated practicing was just like, this is the job, and I'm going to kind of fill this time that is kind of allotted, even if there's not a lot of cases or calls coming in. And it definitely has held true in terms of that habit development of follow-up. Like, you have probably, of any attorney at the office, the best kind of follow-up structure of, texting client back, calling them like as soon as you're freed up to call like prioritizing those new consults, this deep into practice, I think, is something that a lot of people just kind of let go of as their schedules get busier. And it's like, hey, we can just, I can wait a little bit longer. I have this other meeting. It's like, this new client is the priority. And even when we started kind of recently over the past few years, like started having, or really kind of primarily in this past year, started kind of pushing a lot of traffic consults onto intake members, there's definitely like a certain amount of kind of resistance on your end, just because it's kind of like, I don't know if they're going to be able to get back to these people fast enough. Like, I don't want to, lose out on a client. I want to make sure that, I can close the deal. And I think that that's such a healthy mindset of like, just kind of, just incredible persistence about following up with people. It's something that is so simple in terms of being, a key to success, but it's not easy because it takes like incredible commitment over a long period of time. Like, it's just, you got to do it every day. Like, you can't take, weeks and months off of like, killer follow-up with people. So you're the motto of like follow-up. So I think that was definitely a huge part of both early success, and then also like that, power of momentum over time of just that constant follow-up has just continually resulted in high conversion rate, continually resulted in like people coming back, having a ton of trust. You knock out emails like nobody's business. I mean, it just, if somebody is reaching out to Gint is responding. And I think that's such a very unique mindset.
Yeah. And it's something that I've tried to train into myself, like I said, from the get-go, and it's obviously paid off well later on in practice. Um, my thought process has always been, you know, we might be having a great year, we might be having a great month, we might be having a great week, but that phone could stop ringing. So at any given point, if someone's calling me and thinking about hiring me, I want to get back to them as soon as possible. I want to try to turn that into a paying client, because who knows?
Yeah.
Maybe we won't get any more phone calls,
Yeah.
or maybe we'll slow down. I mean, you always want to kind of always be closing. That's a kind of corny saying from, I don't remember what movie it's from, but
Yeah, no,
yeah.
100%. I think that you in particular, again, like having that mindset is just such a it's so important, I think, for the criminal defense attorney, maybe for any like small firm owner, because you do see those like ebbs and flows somewhat in the calls coming in. And when things are going well, it's easy to be like, oh man, like I'm gonna sit back and rest on my laurels here for a little bit because it's, I've been grinding. And so it feels good to kind of like take my foot off the gas for a minute. But then inevitably that like brick wall is coming, down the road, or at least the gas appears to be running out, or you got to refuel. And so, I mean, there's just going to be those kind of peaks and valleys from the call volume side of things and revenue side of things. And so I think just, having that never complacent mindset is so powerful, because that just allows further, when you do experience those lows, it's not as big of a deal because you just had your foot like on the gas the entire time.
Oh yeah, yeah. And I think there's definitely certain attorneys who, may just say, well, if they really want me, they'll wait for me.
Yeah.
And there are definitely those types of clients. I've had clients who are like, I only want to speak with Gint. I only want to speak with Gint. I will wait until Friday if that needs to happen. And then there's also the people that are like, well, cases will come my way.
Yeah.
But I don't know if it's something in my mind or whatever. I always just think, if I don't get back to them as soon as possible, they might call someone else. They might hire someone else. They might, you know, run across somebody in the street that might, say, oh, yeah, yeah, I can help you. And then by me sitting around and waiting and not calling them back, that's potentially a lost client, potentially lost revenue, potentially lost, repeat customer or great referral base, whatever. I want to turn that into something, hopefully.
Yeah, I think, when I started out, it was kind of similar in terms of, when the phone would ring, it felt so unbelievable. It was like, oh my gosh, there's somebody actually calling to, try to reach out about a legal problem. Like I am calling that person back and then following up immediately by email and then like giving them a phone call back the next day. And I think that is something that if you haven't experienced those periods where it is like there is no calls coming in, then it's hard to kind of have that sense of urgency. But there is really like no urgency, like having your first phone call in 3 days and being like, it's like this sense of gratitude of like, oh my gosh, there's somebody that's out there on the other line that's looking for somebody. And yeah, I think having zero ego of like being like, they're definitely they're calling me, because they need my specific services. I think for both of us, it's like they don't know who I am from Adam, and I have no reason to believe that they're going to be worried if they go find somebody else to call them back.
Oh yeah. And I mean, especially in those early days where, no one had heard of Minick Law in the
Yeah,
Wilmington area. I had no ties to the community. It's not like I came from, a family of lawyers who had been
yeah,
here for, generations or anything like that. So yeah, I mean, I was kind of running scared at that point and just kind of grasping at whatever I could do. But I think a lot of it also stems from my background in college and high school. I did a lot of service industry jobs, and I feel like everybody does them, but it was kind of ground into me that, even if you're having a bad day, even if you don't like the person, even if, anything that, could have happened, you want to extend the best service that you can, even if it's through gritted teeth. And a lot of people will do that some of the time. I felt like I had to do it all the time. And I think that's bled over into my professional career as a lawyer as well, where, I'll have some potentially problematic clients or, bad situations. But, even in those situations where you want to respond back with anger or, letting someone sit and stew for a while, oh, I'll call them, tomorrow or in 2 days. It's just something in me that I'm like, well, let's just rip the band-aid off. Let's get this over with. Let's get through this. It's not worth basically not responding or not having the right attitude or, extending that courtesy that I think I learned through being a server or
Yeah.
working through that whole service industry for such a long time. And although it was not the most enjoyable job that I ever had, I think I'm very grateful for kind of what it instilled in me.
Yeah, I think there's two, there's, I think, multiple benefits that come from just immediate follow-up, even with the angry or upset client. Two of them are that, first of all, like when somebody calls in and calls, leaves a voicemail or sends an email that's, they're not happy with how things are going or with outcome, whatever it might be. The longer you leave that unanswered, there is like a anxiety baggage that kind of weighs down on you. But secondly, the longer that you take to respond, the more it builds the upset in the other person, because it's like I've communicated my frustration and I'm getting crickets back from my lawyer that I paid for this thing. So I think, follow up with the potential client is something that I think for everybody makes sense, even if it's difficult to actually put it into practice, because it's like, oh, there's other things that I've got to do, this and that. But it's like, everybody has some level of desire to follow up with a lead, because it's like this person is potentially going to pay money for us. But there's not really that same sense of like desire to follow up with somebody that is upset. But the faster you make that happen, you just remove so many potential problems. And from the get-go, I think that you've had that mindset of like, let's just knock this thing out. I mean, we would have, I think, phone calls sometimes in the particularly in the early days, although we still have this some now, where there would be a client that he had called in with this particular concern or whatnot, and you would call almost like immediately. We would talk about it, and then you'd call kind of call right back. I mean, I just think that's such a critical component of customer service, client experience.
Oh yeah. And I mean, I always think of it as well, if I were on the other side, if
Yeah.
I'm sitting there in one of the most stressful kind of situations in my life, facing some kind of criminal charge, pray to God that doesn't happen, but, you know, uh, sitting there, nerve wracking, maybe have never gone through the process, don't know what to expect. I found an attorney, paid them a decent amount of money, and, I have a question. I shoot them a phone call or I shoot them an email and I don't hear a response, I'm getting worried. Are they actually representing me? Are they actually looking at my case? Are they, responsive? Because to me, if I'm paying someone a decent amount of money, I want some response. So from the get-go, I've always told myself if someone calls me, I want to respond to them no later than 24 hours after a phone call. Most of the time, it's same day or within the hour, within a couple of hours, if possible. Someone shoots me an email, it's not a good thing. I'm on my phone all the time. I see those emails come through. It used to be that I would respond immediately, even after hours, but kind of cut that back a little bit since I've got more responsibilities and more family obligations. So I don't want to do that. But if someone's emailing me or texting, I try to get back to them as quickly as possible because I want to put them in a position where they're not nervous or they're not anxious as a result of me. They're always going to be nervous or anxious about the bigger picture, the charges they're facing, the plea they might be taking, the trial they might have, tomorrow or next week or whatever. But I don't want them to have more anxiety or more stress as a result of me not communicating with them, because at least that's something that I can control. I might not be able to control the results or the outcome of their case, um, but communication is something I can
Yeah,
control.
I mean, it's such a huge value point. Like, I think, when you look at, comparing somebody that's been in practice for 2 years versus 20, it's like, well, how is that lawyer with 2 years of experience going to compete? And if you're the person that is responding to every question immediately, you're providing a different level of value than, a lawyer that's taking 3 days to respond or a week to respond or just doesn't respond, period. It doesn't matter like what the outcome is in court. If it's not, questions aren't getting answered, there's not good communication, that person is just building anxiety about a lot of times pretty small stuff. Like, do I have to appear in court? When is my next court date? Even if it doesn't matter when the next court date is, it's like all we got to do is just tell you the court date, and then like we've answered the question. So I think it's such a, again, it's seemingly small, but it's such a huge value point. So yeah, I think you've just definitely set the tone on that side of things. In terms of like building the Wilmington office kind of first, and then like basically our other coastal office in Jacksonville, like how what have been like some of the biggest breakthroughs on that side of things? Like, what maybe not $1 million moments, but in terms of like something that really kind of changed the way you operated, what if anything was kind of a big breakthrough?
Not to sound like a broken record, but I think communication was one of the big breakthroughs.
Mm-hmm.
There are many criminal defense attorneys who don't communicate well. And so when you compare yourself to those attorneys, or if a client, at one point had that attorney and then reached out to you and sees the difference, that's where I think our or my value came through. So I think that was one big point of emphasis, is making sure that all of my clients were appraised of the situation, knew what was going on, and they felt comfortable with my representation. And that led to additional business, whether it's them with additional charges or new cases, or referring out to different people that may put them or find themselves in that same situation. So I think that was one thing. Another thing was just putting in good work, making sure that I was prepared on top of each case. There are definitely attorneys out there that show up to court and say, well, here's my list of cases. Who are these people? What's their story? What type of case is this? Is this a DWI? Is this a
Yeah.
traffic ticket? Is this a felon? I don't know. So I've always had a very good memory, and try to keep track of my cases and keep very, very detailed notes, so that even though, I see a ton of faces now, I don't always recognize every single person immediately. You give me a name, most of the time it pops up in my head, oh, that's that case. Or if that doesn't happen, I can pull up our case management software, see the detailed notes that I have in there, and immediately kind of jog my memory. Um, so that's kind of another thing. But I don't necessarily know if there was one specific moment or thing or opportunity that occurred that really kind of set it off. I think it was just laying the groundwork and seeing the results from that groundwork. You don't build a city in a day.
Yeah.
You start with the infrastructure, you lay down the pipes, the utilities, the roads, the kind of the boring stuff that no one wants. Everyone wants the skyscrapers, the
Yes.
fancy buildings or whatever. those don't come immediately. You gotta, start from the bottom, do the grunt work, the boring stuff that nobody wants, and then that will lead to the better things, and that success, the cases, you know, the phone ringing, which was the biggest thing.
100%. I think that you have like you're just the model of compound interest, or the compounding effect. It's, and I think that that's why Will, who's our associate in Jacksonville, great guy, hilarious, was in the Asheville office last summer, and when he went down to like man the Jacksonville office, part of his like top secret job was to learn if Gint was an actual robot. Like that was his like assignment coming down. But I think there is this like machine mentality of, I'm just going to make sure that I, request review, and I do it the same way every time. And when I continue a case, I send a follow up to the client, and I do it in the same way every time. And when a new call comes in, I return that phone call, and I do it the same way every time. Like that, just that, and maybe, maybe the system itself does evolve over time, but just that mentality of I'm just going to like kind of keep churning the wheel is killer over a period of 1 year, 3 years, decade. You just start to see like how much that flywheel can really start moving, as you're building that momentum. And I think again, kind of go back to like this humble mindset. One of the key ways that the defense has an advantage in a district case. The law is typically not on our side. The facts are typically not on our side, but time and preparation is a huge advantage that we hold over the DA if we properly
Absolutely.
leverage that. And so I think that going into court with this mindset of I'm going to be, my client may have been drunk as hell, but I'm going to like, argue this issue that exists on the case with like as good a presentation as I can put out there. And I think one thing that is really cool about your prep model is bounce every case that is going to trial off of another lawyer. Like there, and a lot of cases that don't go to trial. Like what can I do to kind of mitigate these circumstances, kind of put my client in a better position for plea? And I think that maybe is typical for younger lawyers, but I think that at some point people either feel like they don't have the time to do that they don't need somebody else's input. And you have like kind of very much kept as part of your prep repertoire, bouncing cases off of other lawyers. And it's such a healthy, again, model for our younger lawyers at the firm to basically, see, hey, this is something where there's this constant goal of two heads are better than one approach to any given case. And so I think, if you go in again with as many advantages as you possibly can have. And if you're a new lawyer, that's a couple of days out of law school. The advantages are not many, but preparation is, something that you have the ability to control how much you put into a case.
Oh, absolutely. My approach has always been to get as many opinions as possible on every little thing, no matter how little or minor it may be, just to make sure I'm not missing something. And I think a lot of that stems from that, early young attorney not knowing what I should know, and making sure that I'm not missing something that I'm not even aware of. And I mean, even to this day, I'll have a case in court, you indicate it's for trial or for plea, and there's always some downtime. You're either waiting for a record or, you're waiting for court to die down so the trials can start. A lot of attorneys kind of either go off to another courtroom, deal with other cases, which I do, but a lot of times you're sitting there and you could sit there on your phone, you could read a book. I sometimes just like to kind of go through the defense bar and just ask every single person there, hey, I got this case. Here's what I'm thinking. Do you see something that I'm not seeing? Or what do you think of this angle? Or what do you think of this strategy? And I'll ask anyone who will listen to me. And I'm sure there's attorneys out there that are like, man, why does he keep asking me these questions? But, in my mind, the more sets of eyes you can get on a report or a case, or the more brains that you can get engaged on some kind of trial strategy or tactic, the better. Um, Now, I also try to return the favor as much as possible. If someone asks me a question or is unsure of how to do something, I'll sit there and I'll detail, well, here's what I would do, or here's who you need to talk to, or here's which document you need, which form you need filled out. And sometimes, that might not be something that I should be spending time on. I might have something else that I need to do. But, I'm firmly a believer of karma. If I help someone out, someone else might help me out. It all kind of comes around on that end of things. Sometimes it is a little bit awkward when, someone comes up to you and is like, hey, I've got this case, and they start describing the case, and then you suddenly realize, oh,
you got that consult.
I spoke with that guy, and he didn't decide to hire me. He hired you. But here's what I would have done. Most of the time, I don't say that because it's just a little awkward, unless it's a good friend of mine or something like that. But it's always funny when it kind of comes around.
That is funny.
And
I've
I feel
definitely
like
heard
some
that.
attorneys might, at that situation, might be like, "Wow, he didn't hire me. I'm not going to help him out." But I try to provide as much information as I can. We're all in this together. We're trying to get the best outcomes for our clients, and try to get cases through as quickly as possible. So, but yeah, that's kind of the approach that I always take. I mean, the more information that you can get, the better. I hate missing information, or not having the time to look through something and feel like you missed something, or should I have made that objection, or should I have filed that motion, should I have done X, Y, or Z. I don't want to be sitting here thinking about it after the fact and be like, man, I missed that. That could have turned out well. But
Yeah, I think reaching out to somebody else, whether it's in your own office or another member in the bar, is just such a powerful way to make sure that you're getting a second set of eyes on the scenario. Is there a better way I could present this plea, this case? I think it's huge in terms of that, like, kind of flywheel mentality of, like, cumulative effect, this compounding effect of doing the same thing day in, day out. I think it's in the Rudyard Kipling poem, if there's a line, if you can fill the unforgiving minute with 60 seconds worth of distance run. And I think that when I look at your calendar, you've got this kind of unbelievable ability to kind of you use your calendar almost as like a to-do list, and kind of like make sure that you're getting everything knocked out. And I think that there's a lot of time management strategies out there, or lack of strategies about time management. But when I look at most attorneys' calendars, even in our own firm, a lot of calendars show court dates, or maybe like an in-office meeting. Your calendar is just like packed to the brim with, call this client back, send this email, deliver this follow-up. And so you have like a meticulous plan for how you're going to use your time in the office. And I don't know that it's always like slotted in the time frame that you're going to do it, but talk a little bit about like your calendaring system, because I think that you really do fill the unforgiving minute with 60 seconds worth of distance run.
yeah, I mean, in undergrad and even in law school, I feel like my mind was a steel trap. I didn't have to write anything down. I always remembered assignments. I remembered when papers were due. I could just be like, oh, I need to do that at 5 p.m. I'll do it. I looked at people who had, daily planners or calendars or things on their phones, and I'm like, wow, that sounds like a lot of work. Why would anyone do that? Like, I'll remember this. Back when I was young and, had nothing else on my mind, very easy to do. As soon as I started practicing, I realized if it's not written down, it's not happening. I'm not going to remember that. I still remember a good amount of things, and it still works. But I have firmly become a believer of, if it doesn't get on my calendar, there is probably no chance I'm going to remember it. And in our profession, if you forget something, not only can it hurt me, but ultimately it can hurt my client, or it can set me up to look like an idiot in court in front of a judge or in front of the DA, or you missed a filing deadline, you forgot the form for your client's limited driving privilege, they're not going to be able to drive home that day. So early on, we use Clio as our case management software. And like you said, I learned from you and from other attorneys, put your cases on the calendar so you know where they are. But I was looking at the calendars and there's plenty of space on there. So I was like, let's turn this into a to-do list. So I would not suggest anyone look at my calendar every single morning at 8 a.m. because it's probably filled with anywhere from 20 to 55 entries.
It's awesome.
Most of them are court dates from 9 to 11 a.m. That's kind of how I have it set up. But the rest could be anything from, email this DA about a plea, or request X, Y, and Z from, the police department, or follow up with this client. Or I also use a personal to-do list, set up a doctor's appointment, go get my oil change or whatever. But every day at 8 a.m., walk into the office, look at that calendar, immediately get a little overwhelmed with how many things are on there. But then I basically delete things as I get through them. So essentially, it's a giant checklist. And my goal at the end of every day is to have completely gotten rid of every single event that's not a court date, because I want to keep those there as, a record. And the big thing is to never move something from one day to the next day. I forgot to email someone, I'll just do it tomorrow. But if you get into that habit, you're just going to keep kicking that can down the road and you're never going to accomplish it. So as I progress through the day from 8 a.m. all the way till typically about 5 when I leave, my goal is to slim that calendar down as much as possible, get it all knocked out. And that way, as I'm closing up at the end of the day, I look at the calendar, it's nice and clean. I can get the hell out of the office.
Yeah, I love it. I think that you're not an attorney who, when you walk into the office, there's like a stack of papers that, you can tell this person has got like a backlog of work items, and I am just going to get like put into this pile of shit to get like knocked out at some point in the future. I think I feel like, again, in terms of, this mindset of work-life balance, you seem to be somebody that has like a really healthy family life that, can kind of leave work at the door, so to speak, to some extent. And I really do think that the way that you have your calendaring system set up, and you're kind of like, hey, I'm going to knock these things out so it's not weighing me down, is really a part of that, kind of being able to leave work at work. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that front, but that's, my perception.
Yeah, I mean, my goal when it comes to work is to check out at 5 o'clock and try not to think about work until the next day. As a lawyer, that's never going to happen. You get home 5 o'clock, you're hanging out with your family, you're eating dinner, something triggers something in your mind, and you're like, ooh, I got that plea tomorrow, or I got that trial, and then you start thinking about it. But I try to separate it as much as possible if I can. And to do that, it all kind of stems from organization, because if you're well organized and well prepared, you don't have to cram the night before. You don't have to bring home work over the weekends if you can. I mean, there are times and situations where that has to happen. I mean, luckily for me, my practice is not super heavy felony based, so I don't have to go through volumes of discovery, don't have to prep for week-long jury trials for the most part. So I mean, that's helpful. But basically, the more you prepare, the more you are organized, the more you set up a process or a system, the easier it gets to basically get through your cases and not have to stress out about them or frantically get stuff together at the last minute. Now, obviously, I'm speaking at 8 years, 9 years worth of experience. So, things that I do now, I would have probably spent hours on overthinking everything, making sure every little contingency was planned out when I first started. But now I've been doing it long enough that I can pretty much know, okay, this is what I need to do. This is what I need to hit. I don't have to sit there and prep out every single question for a trial or, you know, take things and analyze them over the weekend. But I think it all, again, not to sound like a broken record, stems from that organization and preparation and trying not to put things off to the last minute. Now, don't get me wrong, I do procrastinate, and there's definitely times where, I'm under the gun. But, if I can knock something out in advance, it only pays off dividends in the future. So that's kind of the mindset that I take. Although I do remember my first trial, I stressing out. I brought everything home over the weekend. That weekend, I was practicing my closing arguments, was making notes, doing all that prep work. My wife Margaret just looks at me. She's like, "You're going to be doing this for every trial moving forward?" Yeah, I guess so. And it definitely was like that for the first couple of years. I'd show up to my trials with pre-planned out cross-examination questions, direct examination questions. And attorneys would look at me and be like, "What are you doing, man? You don't need to do this." And once I finally kind of stepped away from that, a lot of that stress has gotten a lot more manageable because I'm like, yeah, I've done this enough. I can get it figured out.
Yeah, I think that's that kind of like cumulative effect in kind of life as well, right? Like beyond just like the benefit in the business world, like just in terms of like anxiety, the more that you do the same thing over and over and over again, put yourself in uncomfortable situations, the more it becomes pretty normalized to be in front of it's like, oh, I forgot I've got a trial on tomorrow, like we got this, knew it was there. I'm prepared for it, but it's not, you're not going to bed every single time, like, unable to sleep like those first few trials. I think that's huge. Well, as we like kind of, start coming to a close, again, I think, one of the greatest blessings, honestly, in my life has been having you and Lance as partners at the office. I think that we were pretty fortunate in that after, like, pretty shortly after we formed our partnership, we went into the mess that was COVID. And we used that time really to kind of think through, who we were as an office, our core values, our brand promises, what was our like kind of 10-year goal system? What did we want to do in like the short term? Really kind of spent a lot of like mental energy in trying to kind of think through a bigger picture of the firm culture. And so in terms of just some of the developments that you've gotten to see, since interning at the office and then through, kind of like getting the Wilmington office off the ground, and now very much like kind of driving forward the firm. What have been some of the kind of most important, building blocks, if we want to call it that, for kind of creating the culture at the office? What do you think some of those things are?
I I have a hard time with some of this because there's definitely times when we were doing all that work during COVID that I was like, why are we doing this? Is this really necessary? But again, it kind of goes back to that infrastructure example. Until you do the groundwork, you're not going to have that success. And I think one of the biggest things that came out of that was just having a distinct plan, knowing what we are looking for, what our kind of grand strategy is, game plan is, and then ultimately investing in the right people. Without the right
Yes.
people, none of this matters. You get that one person that can completely change an office, change a practice area, change anything, and they're worth more than you could, ever pay them. So I think the biggest thing that I have seen for the most part is taking a much more deliberative approach to who we bring on, who we put in certain positions, and who we put in certain areas of responsibility, and really focusing on making sure we get the right person, not necessarily just the person we need to fill a seat. That stopgap measure that, just solves the issue temporarily, but might wind up causing issues down the road, whether, internal strife, or, they're only here for a month or 2 months because they're looking for a, bigger, better opportunity, or, they're not fully invested or fully engaged. I think that's the biggest thing that I've noticed for the most part, um, in developing kind of our firm, our offices, our culture. The people make or break anything that you're going to do.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that. I think that in the early stages of kind of the business build, when I, initially brought Lance aboard, it was really as like a direct result of reading the E-Myth and being like, we are going to like take this system that did not exist. There's no system, but it was like, we're going to take this, system that again is not real, and put it into other places. And so the mindset in the early days of growth was like, let's focus on the systems and developing systems. And it honestly took like a lot of work to kind of massage some of those. And we are definitely currently probably having some of the biggest breakthroughs systematically that we've ever had at the firm. And it's not because we've, somehow now discovered these grand new systems. It's because we have the right people. So there was like this shift that occurred to where it's like, yeah, systems are great, but people, I always think of the advanced auto parts like mantra of the best part is our people. That's something that, just makes so much sense in, really any business, but like I would say, particularly in the service industry, like that is really the, who your clients are interacting with is the people at the office. And that's who they're going to then refer cases based on and build their, kind of future, uh, uh, you know, uh, belief system about what you guys do at a specific, location or firm in general is going to be based on those interactions with people. So I think that's huge. The other thing, and maybe we can kind of leave with this, I think that one of the kind of like great, um, perspectives that you bring into like kind of the partnership mold is like a very kind of like analytical and kind of like financial, I won't say necessarily like accounting, but like just does this make kind of like financial sense? You really bring like a great, um, kind of like financial model of, are these initiatives that we are driving, does it kind of like help us kind of generate more revenue, which means we can take better care of our people, which means that we can kind of deliver a better service to our client? Like, is this something that is kind of like driving in the right direction? And do we have the data to support that decision? My brain is like going a million different directions, and hey, let's try this new initiative and let's do this new thing. And I think that you've got like a really great sense of, how do we use data. So I feel like data is much more a part of our firm identity since you've become, kind of one of the partners that is driving the firm forward and really has helped us. So in terms of like anything that you've seen, from like a numbers side of thing or analytics, just the importance of that, anything that you can add on that front would be awesome.
Yeah. I mean this in the nicest way possible, Jake, but I would say that you don't always necessarily know the number side of things. And that, is great in that you're a very much kind
When
of,
you say don't always, be like basically never.
you're much more of a big, pie in the sky, big ideas, which you absolutely need, but you also need to be grounded to reality in
Yes.
regards to, does this make sense? And without really knowing where the dollars are going or what revenue you're generating or what expenses you have, you might have the best business ideas ever. You might have the best customer service ever. But if you can't turn a profit, or you can't pay yourself, you can't pay your people, it's going to be a very short business, short, venture overall. And so basically with kind of the model that we have with the multiple offices throughout the state, I think the big thing on my end of thing is to just figure out, where is everything going? How is everything working? Are we turning a profit? Are we, making sure that we're taking care of our people, our clients, ourselves, and not just, cycling money in and out without making it make sense. So through or on that end, basically making sure we're running regular reports, seeing what the daily numbers are, what the monthly numbers are, what the yearly numbers are, how do they compare to previous years, how do they compare to previous months? Can we see any kind of trends or, try to predict, typically is March a good month? Is it a bad month?
Yes. Yeah.
Do we need to prepare for that December slowdown when, people are out of the office on holidays? People are not worried about their court date in January and February because, hey, it's Christmas, it's New Year's off. That's a next year problem. So I think my big approach when it comes to our partnership is to try to make sure that we keep an eye on those numbers, make sure we have a pulse on that, and make sure we don't put ourselves in a position where suddenly we're scrambling because we didn't plan on something, or we have a large expense that came up, or suddenly those phones stop ringing for 5 days and no money is coming in, or very limited amount of money is coming in. Making sure we're set on the financial end of things so that we can focus on the important part, which is producing or providing good results to our clients, and ultimately making sure everyone's being taken care of.
Yeah, I think that our reports and analytics have really just massively improved with you having a pulse on those things and kind of building systems of reporting and kind of data collection, and then reviewing data, what data matters, what can we ignore. Like there's a lot of nuance to that, and it's so refreshing now. We recently had a couple of week period where there's 3 or 4 attorneys at the office that are like, man, it feels like the calls are down. Like it feels like, there's been a little bit of a dip in calls. And so instead of just being like, is this the feeling? We can go look at the numbers and be like, yeah, actually there is a dip. Like there's a drop off that we've experienced in these type of calls or consults over this period of time, because we are tracking that. And so it just feels so much better to be relying on numbers versus on feelings. And I think that's one of the difficulties of being like a newer attorney, or, an attorney, that's, I would say that, even at like a decently large size before you and Lance kind of joined as partners, there was a lot of that, like, I was going on gut, and it's like that just does not get you where you need to go in the long haul. Like you need hard and fast data to kind of improve. One of my favorite sayings is, what gets measured gets improved. And that's, I think, the model that you have kind of stressed with with all of our systems, whether it's kind of intake numbers, phone calls, financial, numbers between office, where are we kind of spending our, our resources. Like there's just so much that is data driven. What is our, marketing analytics look like? I think just having that constant call to show me the money, show me the numbers, like that's such a really important thing when you are trying to run a legal business. So that's been just killer.
Yeah. Because so many lawyers take the approach of, I'm a lawyer, I need to be in the courtroom, I need to be solving my client's problems, which is absolutely true. But not only that, you need to be making sure that it also makes financial sense, and or you're turning a profit, taking care of yourself, taking care of your people, because without that, you're just setting yourself up for failure.
100%. Well, it's a huge blessing to have you as a partner, and it's been a great blessing to have you on the podcast. Again, thanks very much for coming on and sharing the keys to success from intern to growing Wilmington office, and now really like driving the firm as a whole forward. It's been a wild ride, and I'm glad we've kind of gotten to take that ride together.
Oh, absolutely. Thanks for taking that leap on me. I hope it's paid off.
100%, man. Pumped about it. So looking forward to the next chapter.
Sounds good. Should be fun.